Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's in case you missed it, top gold and silver stories for the weekend at September 24th, 2016. A Comeyesque Fed explains why they didn't raise rates. Fed holds off on raising interest rates again. Presidential campaign heats up. A baffled Hillary scolds supporters via video conference. Now let's get to it. Top story of the week has to be the presidential campaign heating up. Hillary Clinton canceled live events, and she seems to be campaigning now in front of a screen, clueless in Chappaqua. Hillary laments, moans, screeches to a group of union members in Las Vegas. Why aren't I leading by 50 points, you might ask? Putting aside the why am I not grammatical error, that type of rhetorical question would probably lead to many humorous responses, and I'm sure it has. I have a few of my own, but I'll leave that to your imagination. Meanwhile, Trump is speaking to large crowds, and Trump is gaining in some of the so-called, battlefield states, including Ohio. CBS covered the rise of Trump in Ohio, especially amongst working Democrats. When I clicked on the article, I expected to see some balanced reporting on why someone like Trump might be resonating with working class Democrats. Instead, I was treated to a profile of a Trump supporter as someone who, click on the link, this is exactly what the story talks about, as someone who pisses out his window. And then they interviewed the educated woman downstream from this Trump voter, obviously a male, who has to put up with this type of degeneracy. And so the message there is that Trump supporters pee out windows and the educated people have to put up with it. In any event, that is your balanced news from CVS. I find it amusing that the media is trying to prop up Hillary literally, figuratively, financially, in every other way. And we'll see if they can manage to pull it off in November. Top economic story of the week is basically the Fed again. Shouldn't be the Fed. The Fed loves the attention, loves to be able to talk the markets to where they want, but doesn't have to do anything. So how hard can that job be? You meet every month, every 2-3 months, whatever it is. You sit around, you yak, and then you don't do anything. Okay. A wonderful job. Gold and silver. Gold closed last week at 13.10, but closed up this week 2.1% at $1,337.10. Silver had a better week. Silver climbed all the way to 1967, up from 1875 last week, up nearly 5%. Gold silver ratio below 70. It closed at 67.98 ounces to 1, still very high by historical standards. Chart of the week. Now, because silver for the last 2 or 3 months, at least the sovereign mint sales at the U.S. Mint, the Perth Mint, have been relatively low, especially compared to the earlier part of this year and in recent years as well, have gone down. The premiums are now slightly about less than 20%. You can see from the chart last summer when there was a shortage of silver eagles due to a lack of blanks available for the U.S. Mint to stamp that eagle on there. Premiums are up to almost over 50% at one point. But as you can see now, the dealers seem to be well stocked with silver eagles, so it's a good time if you're interested in buying silver eagles. And one of the reasons you want to buy them is because premiums are low. Well, they're very low now. If you are interested, you can check out the different dealers here that are affiliated with Smaulgld. Remember, I do get a commission if you're so inclined to purchase gold or silver from the site, so keep that in mind. However, you only pay the same price you would pay if you had gone to those sites directly. So if you're interested and it's a suitable purchase for you, it's not a recommendation, please do so. Let's see what else we got this week. Okay, so the week started off with a bomb in New York. Now this was obviously, or appeared to be initially, obviously, a terrorist attack in Chelsea, Manhattan. And the initial response that both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton gave was they had been briefed on the bomb and they were looking into it. Miss Clinton in this clip here says she was briefed on the bombing, but then one of the reporters had, right after she said she was briefed on the bombing, one of the reporters asked a question about how Donald Trump had referred to this incident as a bombing and whether that was a prudent thing to do. And of course, Miss Clinton, who looks like she's rolled out of bed here or arose from a stupor of some point, of some type, suggested that Donald Trump was being imprudent in calling it a bomb. And I guess the fawning media didn't catch on that she had just called it a bomb. And of course, she took the opportunity to take a swipe at Trump, which she can do even when she is half asleep. War on cash. This is really a disgraceful article talking about why the U.S. should phase out all currency larger than $10 bills. I don't suggest you read it. You can get the idea just from the headline. Here's one. Costly upgrades can make ATMs disappear. Now, many ATMs are in convenience stores and other types of point of sale companies. The smaller companies are being asked to put in new ATM machines at their own expense. And the new ATM machines have that chip, the new chip that's in the card because it cuts down on fraud. Well, a lot of the smaller companies are probably not going to think it's worth their while to install a new machine. And so therefore, cash will be less available. And it's just another kind of drip on removing cash from society, because if you can't get it at many places, then you just live without it. Gold. Joe Doe. Actually, his name is Deaux. I think he's a reporter for Bloomberg. He had a story out how funds are dumping gold. Not really. I mean, you show me on this chart where the ETF, I can't really see it there, are dumping gold. First of all, it's not gold, it's gold shares in ETFs. But in any event, that's what he calls gold. But if you look here, since the beginning of the year, gold purchases of ETFs are way up. They've kind of plateaued, but this does not reflect, and I'm looking at this chart, of any type of dumping. Maybe they sold a little of their shares, but they did not do any whole-scale dumping. But that's Joe Doe. Here's another article that, if those of you who follow Smaulgld know, that central banks are not buying gold. There was an article, a lot of people got excited about it, said central banks are boosting their gold reserves. Not really. It's only Russia, China, and to a smaller extent Kazakhstan that are building the gold reserves. United States, Germany, France, India, Switzerland, all the top 10 holders of gold, they're not adding any gold, have not added any gold to their reserves in years, if not decades. And some people say, well, Germany's asking for their gold back, or Netherlands are asking for their gold back. Sure, but they're not adding or buying any more. They're just trying to get back what they supposedly already own. In India, bazaars, old gold is the new black. And that's just highlighting the fact that gold demand in India and China this year are way down because the price is up. And as the Wall Street Journal notes, with prices sky high, Indians are selling off old jewelry and it's taking the shine off imports. Imports are down in India over 50% this year. Now, some say that that's being made up by smuggling. That's not, I can't believe that's true. If there's less demand, why would you bother importing gold into India? When, as the story points out, people will just take advantage of the higher price, turn their gold in, get the cash, and that satisfies the demand rather than having to import legally or illegally. However, it is expected that as we, in the Hindustan Times, is expected that as we enter the gold-giving wedding season and Diwali, that Indian pent-up gold demand will return to India. Economic data, well, here's one that should be up a bit. More taxes on gold coming to India, as if the gold has not suffered enough in India with import duties and a jewelry tax. India is now talking about adding a further tax on to gold. Placerville hosts gold panning championship. Interesting story. You want to check on that. I don't go through all the stories. Please sign up for Smaulgld. You'll receive this blog post every week. You can go through the the links and see what's there. There's a lot of interesting stories. I don't have time to cover them all. Also, when you sign up for Smaulgld, up here you just fill in your email address. It's free. You will also get a 12 a special report, 12 differences between gold and silver. So keep that in mind in your decision whether just to fill in an email. You will get that free report. All right. Mexican peso analyst site. This is Yahoo News. Clinton's illness, a new plunge by Mexican peso. Now, Smaulgld covered this correlation first back in September. We had done an article talking about how Mexico was dumping U.S. treasuries as Trump marched closer to the Republican nomination and also towards the presidency. If you click on that link, you can see we broke that story. We've also broken a lot of stories recently. We broke the Swiss National Bank purchasing mining shares, the Norwegian National Bank doing the same. So again, if you sign up for smaulgld.com, it's a free subscription. You will get those breaking stories as they come off the presses. Here's one. The Central Bank of Russia had a big August. They added 700,000 ounces of gold, which is 21.77 tons, I believe. You can click there. You can read the story. There's a bunch of charts there. If you click on that link on Russian gold acquisitions. Now, McEwen Mining executive, under the same name, McEwen, says he can see a case for gold going to $1,900 by year end. I would hope that he's optimistic since he is the CEO and founder of both McEwen Mining and I think Goldcorp too. Housing starts not very good, and for those who keep yelling housing recovery, the housing recovery has been in price alone. Sales are abysmal. Look at this chart. New home sales are at 1960s and 1970s levels. People can say yes, new home sales are only 10% of the overall home sales. Well, existing home sales aren't that hot either, but just look at that chart. Here's your so-called housing recovery in new sales. You're below where you were in the 60s and 70s. No surprise, Atlanta Fed reduces GDP third quarter estimate to 2.9%. Now that had been as high as I think 3.5%. It's still too high in my imagination, in my estimation, but at least they're reducing their expectations. But again, if they really expected the GDP to be in the third quarter 3-4%, you would have thought that the Fed would have raised rates because it looks like the economy is overheating. Well, we know that number is just hogwash. U.S. Mint sales update. Again, we don't go through these, but I will have a report out at the end of the month on the American Silver Eagle and American Gold Eagle, the American Gold Buffalo sales, and the Perth Mint gold and silver sales at the very beginning of October. But the quick preview is that gold sales have picked up significantly and silver sales have finally started to move up slightly. But the real story is the pickup in the gold sales, especially relative to the silver sales. I don't have a mid-month, late end of month read on the Perth Mint yet, but the U.S. Mint is clearly headed towards a much lower silver to gold sales ratio as the gold sales pick up in September. And the silver sales have picked up a bit, but not as much as the gold sales. Here's an interesting story again. I'm not going to cover it. You click on that link, London Silver Vaults. You can see what's underground in London, a bunch of nice looking silver. Again, U.S. Mint sales update. I report this every day on Twitter on the days that the U.S. Mint reports updates. So if you want to follow me on Twitter at Smaulgld, you can get those updates. I don't update them on my site other than weekly. I did a podcast with Rory Hall over at the Daily Coin for the first time in about a month. We discussed Russia selling gold to China and a bunch of other topics. If you have the time, you can click here and you can check out the podcast conversation that I had with Rory Hall. Gold, top Colombian gold miner faces production halt amid protest. People like this story. Some Canadian mint guy smuggled $180,000 worth of gold where the sun doesn't shine, and that was a big story. Russia targets China for gold sales as VTB, and that is basically what we covered above in the podcast. Now, Russia is the second or third largest gold producing nation. China is the largest gold producing nation. but China, the economy of China and the size of their reserves is much larger than Russia's. So you might ask, why is Russia selling some of their gold to China? Well, Russia already has about 15-16% of their reserves in gold, and they clearly can satisfy their gold demand for their central bank via their domestic production, and they do have some additional gold. Even if China buys every last ounce of its gold production, when it has a $4 trillion foreign reserve account at the People's Bank of China, they're going to need a lot more gold to get that percentage up. Right now, the percentage of gold that China has as percentage of reserves is only, I think, 2.2%. So they're going to need a lot more gold, and their so-called ally Russia looks like they're willing to supply it. They're going to supply about 20 tons a year, up to 80 to 100 tons a year going forward. Okay, so this is the Federal Reserve finally came out on, I guess it was on the 22nd, after their two-day meeting on the 20th and 21st. On the 21st, they came out and said that they were not going to raise rates. And how often can the Fed do this without losing credibility? Not amongst alternative media, financial media people. For them, for us, they've already lost credibility. But for the mainstream, where they said at the beginning of the year, a lot of Fed officials, and that they were going to do 4 rate hikes this year. Well, that's off the table. There's only 2 meetings left. They can't do it 4 times. But I refer to it as Comeyesque because they're always laying out the case before the meeting, and then in the meeting minutes why they should raise rates. Because the economy is doing well, the consumer spending is solid, the labor market is strengthening, all these wonderful things happening in the economy, and also because they said they would raise rates. Well, they haven't. So it almost comes down to no reasonable Fed member under these wonderful economic circumstances would raise interest rates. Now, the reason I think they don't raise rates is, one, they don't believe that things are this wonderful, but also because they don't need to. Because the rest of the world is negative. The Fed only needs to stay slightly ahead of the curve. The only reason they probably want to raise rates a bit is so that they don't have to go directly to another QE if they decide they need to stimulate the economy further. They'd rather probably lower rates than go directly to QE because they're trying to keep some semblance that they're the prudent central bank. They don't have negative rates like the rest of the central banks. And even if they were to lower rates, they still wouldn't be negative. They wouldn't even be zero. That's why they want to get a rate hike in my estimate. And also, because they said they would raise rates, they have to have some shred of credibility. More U.S. Mint sales. And I think we're just about done here. Yeah, okay, so after the meeting, just on cue, a couple of days later, Boston Fed President Rosengren says gradual rate hikes needed now. Now, to his credit, he did vote for the rate hikes at the September meeting. Generally, what happens is these yak attacks for rate hikes come from people who have no voting say, and they're just out there to kind of give cover for why the Fed didn't raise rates, but to kind of highlight that, oh, they're going to because this Fed president, that Fed president, they're all saying we need rate hikes. Rosengren at least put his vote where his mouth was. He was talking about rate hikes before the meeting. He voted for rate hikes during the meeting, and now he's saying after the meeting they need rate hikes. It was a 73 vote, a 7-2-3 vote. Normally it's unanimous, maybe one dissenter, but this time there were 3 dissenters. De-dollarization, Chinese yuan goes global. I'm not going to cover that, but it's an interesting article. You should check it out. Another one I'm not going to cover is world's largest solar plant goes live in India. That should boost some silver demand, or already has boosted silver demand in India, which is down this year. Last year was a record year in silver. This year, silver demand imports are down 30-40% from last year. So maybe they got all the silver they needed last year for this particular plant, and now they're just waiting for prices to come down and or further demand for more silver in solar energy. The manufacturing index was down again in August. And if you're interested in a more extensive analysis on why the Fed didn't raise rates, I did a podcast yesterday. Janet Yellen admits why the Fed won't normalize rates. There are podcast notes at this link. There's also on a YouTube. You can click on there and we'll go through all of the reasons why the Fed did not raise rates and also the interesting press conference that Miss Yellen had on the day that they decided not to raise rates, September 21. In any event, also please check out the Smaulgld Dark Side series. Here I take to task some of the common wisdom about a cashless society, central bank intervention, minimum wage laws, artificially low interest rates, and negative interest rates, and explain why, and rising home prices, why those things aren't necessarily a good thing and are most likely very bad things. So you can always see that in the sidebar if you need something to read. It's not necessarily news, but it is analysis, and these are issues that are constantly in the news, so they give you some background on the issues. Again, remember to subscribe to Smaulgld, and also please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.